Can you imagine fighting a war where your enemies seem to move with a sixth sense, perfectly synchronized like an eerie silent ballet while you were screaming into a dead radio, completely cut off? That's exactly what German tank commanders experienced in the brutal battlefields of World War II. And the shocking truth is their supposed tactical genius was actually the result of an invisible, technological advantage the Americans had, one they simply couldn't comprehend until it was far too late. It makes you wonder, what the hell was going on in those American tanks? It was February 20th, 1943, just north of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. The official battle reports would never truly capture the jaw-dropping sight German tank commanders witnessed that morning. American Sherman tanks were executing maneuvers that utterly defied every single piece of German military doctrine. No visual signals, no flags waving, no flares, not even dispatch riders tearing across the battlefield between vehicles. Yet through the swirling dust and smoke of the North African desert, 5 Sherman tanks, separated by broken, unforgiving terrain, converged on German positions with timing that felt supernatural. Each tank covered blind spots the others couldn't see, each crew knowing exactly where their comrades were positioned. They moved as if they shared a single mind. Meanwhile, in their own Panzer foes, equipped with what they thought were state-of-the-art Fu-G5 radios, German tank commanders were practically tearing their hair out. They struggled to hear their own company leaders through an overwhelming cacophony of static that drowned out their amplitude modulation systems. These 10-watt German transmitters, cutting edge in the 1930s, simply couldn't penetrate more than a few hundred meters, especially when the tanks were moving. And the worst part? Most German tanks only carried receivers. They could hear orders sometimes, but they couldn't report what they saw or, God forbid, call for help when they were under fire. They were fighting partially blind. The Americans, our guys, were operating with technology the Germans didn't even know existed. Inside every single Sherman tank was a frequency modulation, FM radio, crystal-controlled precision, 25 watts of transmission power, and a clarity that cut through engine noise and battlefield chaos like a hot knife through butter. 8,000 miles away from Detroit's assembly lines, the most decisive technological advantage of World War II was quietly revealing itself. It wasn't about thicker armor or bigger guns. It was about the invisible electromagnetic waves that connected every American tank crew in ways the Wehrmacht could never have possibly imagined. This incredible transformation began way back on July 22nd, 1941. That's when the United States Army standardized the Signal Corps radio sets, the SCR-508, SCR-528, and SCR-538 for all medium tanks. Think about that for a second. While German forces were busy advancing through the Soviet Union, using tactics that depended on radio communication between command vehicles, American engineers at the Galvin Manufacturing Company, who you might know better as Motorola, were perfecting the very FM technology that would render German systems completely obsolete. The engineering team behind this wasn't made up of generals or tank designers. It was guys like Daniel E. Noble, who had the brilliant idea to apply FM technology to military vehicles, and Henrik Magnoski, the principal RF engineer, who solved the monumental technical challenges of installing such sophisticated electronics into the incredibly harsh, violent environment of a tank. Their creation weighed a hefty 181 pounds, but it transformed every single Sherman tank into a node in the world's very first battlefield network, the B604 transmitter. They built generated 25 watts of power, 2.5 times the output of the German Fu-G5. It operated in the 20.0 to 27.9 MHz frequency range, giving us 10 preset channels with crystal-controlled stability. And here's where it gets really smart. The dual BC603 receivers in the SCR-508 allowed commanders to monitor multiple frequencies simultaneously. This wasn't just a fancy feature. It was a capability that would prove absolutely decisive in combat. But the real revolution, the true magic, lay in frequency modulation itself. Edwin Armstrong's FM technology, licensed to the military, simply eliminated the static and interference that plagued the German amplitude modulation systems. While German tank radios picked up every electrical discharge, every spark plug firing, every track movement as infuriating, deafening noise, American FM radios delivered crystal-clear voice communication. Even during the hellish roar of artillery barrages, our crews could talk, coordinate, think together, while the Germans were just hearing static. Then came November 8, 1942. Operation Torch. American armor landed in North Africa, bringing our tanks, fully equipped with SCR-508 radios, to the battlefield. They were about to demonstrate their undeniable superiority over German communications. The Afrika Korps, despite being the Wehrmacht's most experienced armored force, was about to operate under severe, crippling communication limitations they didn't even fully recognize. You see, a standard German tank platoon of 5 vehicles included only 1 or 2 with full Fuji-5 transceivers, capable of both transmitting and receiving. The rest of the tanks, they carried mere Fuji-2 receivers. They could hear orders, but they couldn't respond or report enemy positions. Imagine that. A German tank platoon functioned through a rigid hierarchy. The platoon leader transmitted orders, and the subordinate tanks acknowledged by actions, not words. And when those easily identified command tanks with their multiple antennas were destroyed, the entire platoon lost coordination. They were isolated, vulnerable. This fundamental flaw would prove catastrophic against American forces. Where every tank could assume command functions, every tank could talk. The Battle of Kasserine Pass from February 14th to 24th, 1943 provided the first major, horrifying demonstration of our radio superiority, though tactically a German victory. The battle revealed capabilities that stunned Wehrmacht observers. During the confused, brutal fighting, scattered elements of the U.S. 1st Armored Division maintained coordination across 50 miles of battlefield. Tank crews who had never even met before were coordinating attacks, warning each other of threats and calling for artillery support through crystal-clear FM communications. The Germans just watched, baffled. Their signals intelligence units intercepted American transmissions. They noted the exceptional clarity, the seamless coordination. The 10th Panzer Division's intelligence section reported that American units maintained communication at ranges where German radios produced only static. But even more disturbing was the dawning realization that every American tank appeared capable of full transmission, not just command vehicles. This shook their entire understanding of armored warfare. The German Fuji-5 radios, operating on amplitude modulation in the 27.0 to 33.3 MHz range, suffered from fundamental, unavoidable limitations. Their 10-watt transmitter struggled to reach 2 to 3 kilometers in ideal conditions, plummeting to mere hundreds of meters when vehicles were moving. Every spark plug, every electrical motor, every track movement generated interference that their AM systems simply couldn't filter out. It was a constant cacophony. Then came September 1943, and American armor rolled into Italy. Mountainous terrain, they thought, should have negated any radio advantages. Oh, how wrong they were. Instead, FM technology proved even more valuable in conditions that rendered German AM radios utterly useless. The SCR-508's frequency modulation handled the multipath interference of mountain valleys far better than amplitude modulation ever could. Our tanks coordinated movements through terrain where visual signals were impossible, and German radios failed completely. During the advance toward Cassino, American armored units demonstrated capabilities that simply defied German understanding. Tank platoons separated by entire ridgelines coordinated attacks with precision that German doctrine said required visual contact. The 1st Armored Division's after-action reports casually described routine coordination at distances where German radios produced only static. The Germans were left scratching their heads, fighting ghosts. June 6, 1944. D-Day. As Sherman tanks rolled off landing craft at Normandy, their SCR-508 radios maintained contact with naval fire support, coordination that would have been impossible with German technology. But the hedgerow fighting quickly revealed a critical, deadly gap. Our tank radios couldn't communicate with infantry radios, which operated on entirely different frequencies. The infantry's SCR-300 operated on 40.0 to 48.0 MHz, completely incompatible with the tank's 20.0 to 27.9 MHz range. This communication gap proved deadly in the bocage, where German infantry, armed with lethal Panzerfausts, could approach American tanks while nearby American infantry had absolutely no way to warn them. Our guys were isolated even when allies were just meters away. But American innovation, that unstoppable force, solved the problem within weeks. Our resourceful tank crews mounted EE-8 field telephones and ammunition boxes, which they ingeniously welded to the tank exteriors, wiring them directly into the internal communication system. By Operation Cobra in late July, this simple, ingenious modification had revolutionized tank infantry cooperation. Suddenly, our infantry could talk directly to the tank crews they were supporting, bridging that fatal gap. From July 25th to 30th, 1944, Operation Cobra truly demonstrated the full, terrifying potential of American radio superiority. The 2nd Armored Division, commanded by Major General Edward H. Brooks, coordinated over 200 Sherman tanks through radio networks that enabled unprecedented battlefield control. German defenders from the Panzer Lehr Division faced an enemy that seemed to possess supernatural awareness. American tanks responded instantly to threats reported by other units miles away. Artillery strikes coordinated through tank radios arrived within minutes of target identification. It was devastating. The contrast with German capabilities was stark, almost heartbreaking. Panzer Lehr, once Germany's premier armored division, had been reduced to communication poverty. Most of their tanks operated without radios, depending on archaic visual signals in terrain where visibility rarely exceeded 100 meters. The few functioning radios they did have suffered from interference and limited range, preventing any effective coordination. The irony of this situation was profound. Germany had actually pioneered radio use in armored warfare. Heinz Guderian, the very architect of Blitzkrieg, had insisted on radio equipment in tanks since the 1920s. His book, Achtung, Panzer, published in 1937, emphasized communication as absolutely essential to armored operations. Guderian had developed radio communication systems that enabled tank officers to coordinate attacks. He understood that rapid armor advances required reliable communication. Yet by 1943, German tank production simply couldn't provide the radios Guderian's own doctrine demanded. German production statistics revealed the crisis. In 1943, Germany manufactured approximately 5,700 medium tanks but fewer than 2,000 FUG transceivers. Many radios went to command vehicles and assault guns, leaving regular tank units desperately short of communication equipment. Imagine sending tanks into battle knowing they couldn't talk to each other. Soviet tank forces suffered even worse communication poverty. The T-34, despite being the most produced Allied tank, typically entered combat without any radio equipment at all. Soviet doctrine relied on flag signals and pre-battle planning, with catastrophic results against German forces in 1941. By 1943, Lend-Lease provided some relief with American radios, including SCR 508 sets equipping Soviet command tanks. But even by war's end, only about 25% of Soviet tanks carried radios. The comparison highlighted the astonishing American achievement. While the Soviet Union struggled to equip even 1/4 of their tanks with any radios, America achieved 100% deployment of sophisticated FM systems. Motorola's Chicago factory, which before the war made car radios, became a symbol of American industrial mobilization at its peak. Converting to military production required complete retooling and solving unprecedented technical challenges. Each SCR 508 required 2,048 individual components manufactured to exacting standards. The BC-604 transmitter alone contained 474 capacitors and 385 resistors. Crystal oscillators had to maintain frequency stability despite extreme temperatures and the violent vibrations of combat. Production statistics tell the story of American industrial might. 1942, 3,800 SCR 508. Family radios 1943, 11 to 400 units. 1944, 24,000 units total wartime production. Over 50,000 tank radio sets. This production miracle ensured that all 49,324 Sherman tanks manufactured during the war received sophisticated radio equipment, an achievement no other nation even approached. The SCR 508's advantages went beyond simple frequency modulation. Crystal-controlled frequency stability meant our tanks could preset channels before battle and maintain alignment despite combat conditions. German FUG-5 radios using variable capacitor tuning constantly drifted off frequency, forcing crews to spend precious moments trying to find their comrades. The dual receiver configuration allowed our commanders to monitor their platoon net and the company command net simultaneously. Orders flowed down the chain of command instantly, while commanders maintained full awareness of subordinate situations. Our crews were never truly out of touch, and the BC-606 intercom system integrated seamlessly with the radio, allowing all crew members, gunner, driver, loader, to alert the commander to threats. Throat microphones and noise-canceling headphones enabled clear communication, even during the thunderous chaos of combat. Many German tanks, by contrast, lacked intercoms entirely, forcing crews to communicate by touch or by literally shouting over the din. Imagine fighting that way. Power management provided another crucial American advantage. The SCR-508 operated on either 12 or 24 volts, automatically adjusting to available power. The dynamo motor power supply provided stable, filtered power that eliminated electrical interference. German radios, powered directly from vehicle electrical systems, picked up every spark as static. These tactical advantages, combined with universal radio deployment, utterly transformed American armored doctrine. Our combat command structure, with its flexible task forces organized for specific missions, depended entirely on reliable communications. American commanders could create ad hoc battle groups from different units, confident they could coordinate seamlessly through compatible radios. This breathtaking flexibility utterly baffled German commanders, who were accustomed to rigid organizational structures necessitated by their limited communications. They couldn't conceive of our agility. During the Battle of Erwin in September 1944, the 4th Armored Division faced multiple German Panzer brigades equipped with superior Panther tanks. The Germans had every advantage in armor and firepower, but American radio coordination proved decisively victorious. Every Sherman could report enemy positions instantly. Tank destroyers received targeting information from tanks they couldn't even see. Artillery observers in Sherman command tanks called in devastating barrages within minutes. Over 3 weeks, the 4th Armored destroyed 281 German armored vehicles, while losing only 41 Shermans. A 7.1 kill ratio that completely defied the technical specifications of their tanks versus ours. It was a massacre, because we could talk. Throughout the war, German intelligence tragically failed to grasp the true significance of American communication superiority. Combat reports mentioned American coordination, but attributed it to training rather than the revolutionary technology. A captured September 1944 intelligence assessment stated, "American tank units demonstrate good radio discipline and coordination. This appears to result from extensive training and rigid communication procedures." The report utterly missed the technological advantage. They thought we were just better at following orders. They had no idea we were simply better connected. And because they missed it, German tactics never adapted. They continued targeting supposed command tanks based on antenna configurations, not realizing every Sherman could coordinate battlefield responses. They planned ambushes, assuming American tanks would lose coordination when separated, not understanding that radio contact maintained unit cohesion regardless of visual contact. They fought the war of the past, while we were fighting the war of the future. By March 1945, as American forces approached the Rhine, our communication superiority reached its zenith. The capture of the Remagen Bridge demonstrated the breathtaking speed of American command and control. When the 9th Armored Division discovered the Ludendorff Bridge miraculously intact, radio reports reached 1st Army headquarters within minutes. Within an hour, divisions across the entire front were shifting to exploit the opportunity. German forces, dependent on vulnerable telephone lines that American aircraft systematically destroyed, simply couldn't respond with comparable speed. Our radios created an impenetrable defense of the bridgehead. Tank platoons from different battalions integrated seamlessly, coordinating fires through radio networks. German counterattacks, poorly coordinated due to communication failures, arrived piecemeal and were destroyed in detail. They never stood a chance. April 1945. The encirclement of the Ruhr Pocket demonstrated the culmination of American communication superiority. American armored columns from the 1st and 9th Armies coordinated a complex double envelopment entirely through radio communications. Inside the pocket, 325,000 German troops found themselves trapped, partly because their communications had utterly collapsed. American fighter bombers, guided by radio-equipped forward air controllers, systematically destroyed German communication nodes. Wehrmacht units lost contact with higher headquarters and each other. Field Marshal Walter Model's final messages before communication failure revealed the German plight. No contact with adjacent units. No communication with higher headquarters. Fighting continues but coordination impossible. Imagine the terror, the isolation. American radio superiority profoundly affected the psychological experience of tank warfare. Our crews fought with the comforting knowledge they were never alone. Even when physically isolated, they remained connected through radio waves, part of a larger whole. German tank crews experienced the exact opposite. Profound isolation. Unable to communicate, they fought individual battles within larger engagements. Otto Carius, one of Germany's most successful tank commanders, wrote in his memoir Tigers in the Mud about the challenges of limited communications, though even he focused more on tactical aspects than the fundamental communication gap itself. The strategic implications extended far beyond individual battles. American advances in 1944-45 maintained tempo partly through radio coordination that German forces couldn't match. The Third Army's race across France, Patton's lightning advance, depended on radio networks that maintained control across hundreds of miles. German commanders consistently underestimated American capabilities because they simply couldn't conceive of the communication superiority Americans possessed. Heinz Guderian, in his role as Inspector General of Armored Troops, eventually recognized the problem but couldn't solve it. In a December 1944 memorandum, he acknowledged that American coordination negated German advantages in tank quality. It was a damning admission. After Germany's surrender, American technical intelligence teams evaluated German equipment. Their findings confirmed what combat experience had devastatingly suggested. German tanks often possessed superior armor and armament, but catastrophically inferior communications. A U.S. Army technical intelligence report concluded, German tank communications equipment was approximately 5 years behind American systems. The absence of frequency modulation, limited radio distribution, and poor electrical suppression created critical vulnerabilities. Even Soviet evaluators reached similar conclusions. The Red Army, given access to captured German equipment, chose to copy American radio designs, not German systems, for their post-war development. The proof was irrefutable. Let's just look at the numbers. American radios, SCR 508 family, over 50,000 units produced. Radio deployment rate 100% in Sherman tanks. Transmission power 25 watts, frequency stability crystal controlled, PLR 0.01%. Range moving 7 miles. Range, stationary, 10-15 miles. Average time for fire mission 3 to 5 minutes. 100% of American tanks achieved coordination. German radios, Fuji 5 transceivers. Approximately 6,000 units produced. Full transceiver deployment rate, approximately 20% in their medium-heavy tanks. Transmission power 10 watts. Frequency stability variable plus 1%. Range moving 0.5 to 1 mile. Range stationary 2 to 3 miles. Average time for fire mission 15 to 30 minutes. Only 20% of German tanks had full communication. The radio superiority of Sherman tanks established principles that govern armored warfare even today. Modern main battle tanks carry communication suites that trace their lineage directly to the SCR 508. Digital rather than analog, but fundamentally based on universal deployment and reliable coordination. The German Bundeswehr, rebuilt in the 1950s, prioritized communications based on these brutal World War II lessons. Every Leopard tank manufactured has carried comprehensive radio systems. A Bundeswehr training manual explicitly states, the defeat of superior German tanks by inferior American vehicles with superior radios teaches that information dominance outweighs platform superiority. Modern conflicts continue to validate this lesson. In the 1991 Gulf War, coalition forces with superior communications destroyed Iraqi forces equipped with individually superior Soviet-designed tanks, but inferior radios. In 2003, American forces again demonstrated that network-centric warfare defeats platform-centric warfare. The story of American Sherman tank radio superiority represents a profound victory in the electromagnetic spectrum, one that proved more decisive than any advantages in armor or firepower. German tank crews fought their war partially blind to this revolution, discovering too late that every Sherman tank was not just a fighting vehicle, but a node in history's first battlefield network. The SCR 508 radio transformed the M4 Sherman from an adequate medium tank into a component of a weapons system that included every other American tank on the battlefield. This transformation proved more decisive than any improvement in armor or firepower could have achieved. Every Sherman tank carried the tools of victory, not just in its 75 mm gun or sloped armor, but in that 181 pounds of radio equipment that connected its crew to every other American tank crew. This connection created a collective intelligence that no individual German tank, regardless of superiority in armor or firepower, could match. German forces discovered this reality through bitter, bloody experience at Kasserine Pass in Italy's mountains, across France's hedgerows, and in Germany's final desperate battles. American tanks demonstrated coordination that German doctrine said was impossible without visual contact. The Wehrmacht never developed an effective counter because they never fully understood the technological gap. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel's reported comment at Germany's surrender, whether accurately quoted or apocryphal, perfectly captured this fundamental truth. We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together. America had built not just 49,324 Sherman tanks, but 49,324 nodes in the world's first armored battlefield network. The revolution in military affairs that historians identify with modern network-centric warfare actually began in 1942, when the first Sherman tank with an SCR-508 radio entered combat. From that moment, warfare changed forever. The side with superior communications would defeat the side with superior weapons. The network would defeat the platform, and the connected would overcome the isolated. This transformation occurred largely invisible to German forces. They saw American tactical superiority, but didn't recognize its technological foundation until far too late. By the time German commanders understood that every Sherman tank possessed communication capabilities that most German tanks lacked, the war was effectively decided. The German military's failure to recognize and adapt to American communication superiority stands as one of World War II's greatest intelligence failures. Despite countless battlefield encounters demonstrating American coordination advantages, German leadership never prioritized solving their critical communication weakness. They continued building superior tanks that fought as isolated individuals, while American forces built adequate tanks that fought as coordinated teams. In the end, the electromagnetic waves carried by SCR-508 radios proved more powerful than the armor-piercing rounds fired by German 88 mm guns. The ability to coordinate, to share information instantly, to fight as a unified force rather than as individual vehicles. This invisible advantage determined victory more surely than any visible superiority in armor or armament. The Sherman tank's radio superiority changed warfare forever, establishing the principle that in modern combat, connection equals survival, and isolation equals defeat. German troops discovered this reality on battlefields across 3 continents, learning too late that the Americans possessed not just numerical superiority, but technological superiority in the dimension that mattered most, the ability to fight as one. So what do you think? If you were a German tank commander, facing an enemy that seemed to know your every move, how would you have reacted? Have you ever felt utterly disconnected, unable to communicate when it mattered most? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.